All right, so to get started here with the basic link sharing for our application, let's first of all discuss how the basic flow is going to work. All right, so link sharing, first of all, let me just go into a little more depth on what it is. Basically, right now, right, each of the notes that our user creates has a list of email addresses of users that can access that note, right? Additionally, all of those users have different permissions, right? Some users can just view, some users are allowed to edit the note, and so on and so forth. Now, what link sharing is basically is when we allow anyone with a link to view a note. Now, it is possible to do edit link sharing where anyone with a link is allowed to edit, but I don't really recommend that, first of all. Second of all, if you really do want to go on and implement that afterward, the concepts are going to be pretty much the same, so feel free to do that. Now, link sharing, the way that this is going to work is in addition to having the list of users that we've given specific permission to, right, the list of emails that we've given specific access permissions to, we're also going to have sort of a switch thing, right? It's probably just going to be a button and some text, but basically this will allow users to either turn link sharing on or turn link sharing off. Now, if link sharing is on, right, when a user goes to turn link sharing on, what we're going to do is generate a special link for that note, and anybody who has that link will be able to go to that link and see the note regardless of whether they're logged in, regardless of whether they've specifically been given access up here to their email, and so on and so forth, right? They're going to be able to see the note as long as they have that link. All right, now making this work is, first of all, going to require us to generate this link, which is something that we'll probably want to do on the back end. Right? And while one option would definitely be to just use the note's ID as this link, for security reasons, it's probably better if we just generate some kind of random string in addition to the note's ID. Right? Sort of like a password that gets passed around when this link is sent to other users. Now, the other thing that we're going to have to do is slightly rewrite the endpoint for accessing individual notes such that it allows users to access an individual note if they have specific access to it, and it also allows them to access the note if they have the right link and link sharing for that note is turned on. So anyway, that's going to be our basic flow here, right? We're going to, have to add that little form or component or whatever it ends up being to our permissions list, all right? And we're going to have to generate a link to display inside of here that the user can copy and paste and send around to their friends. And additionally, we're probably going to want to create another page. Whether or not we actually use another component for that page is one thing, but we're going to at least want to have another route that this link will point at, because that route is going to handle permissions and that kind of thing much differently than we were doing before we had link sharing turned on. So that's our basic plan of attack here. Let's get started. And the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to open up our front end. We're going to go to the permissions page, right? So that's going to be our note sharing settings page. That's just what we called it. I've been referring to it as the permissions page, but you get the idea. We're going to open up our note sharing settings page. And underneath where we have our shared emails is where we're going to put this little section where a user can enable and disable link sharing. So here's what this is going to look like. What we're going to do, at least for now, we might break this out into a different component at some point, but we're going to have a div, and inside that div, what we're going to do is put some text that will tell the user whether or not link sharing is disabled, or if link sharing is enabled, it's going to display the actual link. So what that'll look like, we're going to just have a paragraph tag here, and it's going to display one of two things, as I said. It's either going to say link sharing is disabled, or it's going to display some kind of link that looks like this, right? It'll have localhost 8080 and then / blah, 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 whatever that unique identifier for that link sharing page is going to be. So the condition for this, right, deciding which one of these things to display is going to be based off of a state variable that we're going to have, and that'll be something like link sharing enabled. And as a matter of fact, we're going to want to reverse these. Okay, so link sharing enabled will display the link. Link sharing disabled is going to be displayed if link sharing enabled is false. So this link sharing enabled thing, we're going to figure this out from this specific note here. And essentially what we're going to do is inside our database, we're just going to add some kind of property that'll be something like link sharing enabled true or false on that note. So what we'll do for this, we'll say const link sharing enabled, and we're also going to have a property that will be the actual link for that note, or at least the link sharing hash. So we'll just say link sharing hash, and we're going to have to call it that in the database later on when we implement this. And these are both going to come from the note itself. All right, so we have link sharing enabled and link sharing hash. We're actually going to want to put those down below this so that we actually know the note exists, right? If the note doesn't exist, remember we're displaying this note not found page. So now that we have those two things, link sharing enabled and link sharing hash, what we're going to do next, we're already using link sharing enabled to choose what to display in this spot here. What we're going to do with the link sharing hash is add that to here. Now, let's think a little bit about what kind of route we're going to want to display this thing on. We're probably going to want to have a separate route for this than the individual note page. And here's why, right? If we take a look at our note detail page, you can see that we're just getting this note from all of the notes that are automatically loaded by our notes context when our app loads. Now, the problem with this is that notes that have link sharing enabled aren't going to be shared with any specific users, and we definitely don't want to show them in our notes list, right, on our notes page. In other words, we don't want to let every single user of our application see notes with link sharing enabled inside their notes page. So what we're going to have to do here is create a separate page that will actually take care of loading an individual note, right? So on our server, we're going to need to create a route that will allow us to load an individual note, and that route is going to have to make sure that that note has link sharing enabled. But anyway, the point here is that the loading logic for shared notes is going to have to be different. So in my opinion, it'll be easier to just create a completely new page for that. So we've decided we're going to create a new route with a new page. So let's just come up with a basic URL for that. We'll make that something like link sharing / and then the note ID. And then we're going to have the link sharing hash that we generated right here. So we'll say link sharing hash, and that will be the link that will take the user to that page. So now that we have this text, right, we're either displaying a link or we're telling the user that link sharing is disabled. What we're going to want to have below this is going to be a button that will allow the user to switch a note from link sharing enabled to link sharing disabled and vice versa. So let's just add a button here. We're going to say button, and this button is going to say enable link sharing. We're going to want to have one for disabling link sharing as well. And we'll say disable link sharing there. And then what we're going to do is switch which one of these we show based on whether or not link sharing is already enabled. So what we'll do is we'll just say link sharing enabled or enable link sharing. All right, so that will show that if link sharing enabled is false. If you find it easier, and I kind of do too, you can also just change this to and say not link sharing enabled. And otherwise, we're going to show this other button, disable link sharing, if link sharing is enabled. So we'll just say link sharing enabled. You could also do the same kind of thing with a ternary operator as well. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. So we have enable link sharing and disable link sharing. We're going to want both of these buttons to call some kind of function when they're clicked. And both of these functions are going to make some kind of network request to our server that will either enable or disable link sharing, which we're going to have to create two separate endpoints for that as well. So on click here, we'll just create a function called enable link sharing. And for our disable link sharing, we'll create a function called disable link sharing. All right, simple enough. So let's go up here and define those functions. What we're going to do is right up here above our return statement, we'll say const enable link sharing. For now, this is just going to display an alert, right? We'll say alert enabling link sharing. And we'll do the same thing with disable link sharing. We'll say const disable link sharing. And we're going to say equals async. And this one will say disabling link sharing, just to show that these things are hooked up correctly. All right, so now that we have those things, let's just give this thing a test spin. So what we're going to do is in our Notes app, we'll run npm run dev, which will start up both our front end and back end. And we can take a look at this thing. And let's head over to here, and it looks like we need to log in, so we'll say Sean.Wassell, and then I'm going to say test2. And then the password is the one that we set up, so we can click login now. And sure enough, we see our notes. So in order to test this thing, what we're going to do is click on one of our notes, and we're going to click share here, and this should allow us to see this link sharing is disabled thing with this enable link sharing button. All right, if we click on that, we'll see enabling link sharing. Okay, so that function was called at the right time. The next thing we're going to do is we're just going to force this link sharing enabled thing to true by saying link sharing enabled equals true, just so we can see what it looks like when link sharing is enabled. So we can go back here and we see that it's displaying this link thing here, and it says /link sharing /undefined. That's because we don't have a link sharing hash, but we will be generating that later on. Okay, and we also have this disable link sharing button, which we can click, and that will display this little alert here, which shows that that function is working as well. Great, so at this point, we've completed the entry point, so to speak, for link sharing, right? It's just this little component here that allows users to turn link sharing on and off. Obviously, we have a lot more to go, but I hope that this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.